Afternoon to you all and welcome to this wonderful hall here in Abergavenny. Would you be so kind as to take your seats as soon as possible? The service will start in 15 minutes. Byddwch chi mor garedig a cymryd eich seddi os gwelwch yn dda, mae'r gwasanaeth yn mynd I ddechrau mewn chwarter awr. Gwybodaeth, mae toiledau agosau drwy'r drws ar y chwith yn y maes parcio. For your information, the nearest toilets are through the door on my left, your right, are in the car park. Hefyd, mae camerau yn ffilmio'r digwyddiad a mae ffotograffwyr yma a mi fydd na lyniau cyhoeddus yn amlwg, so os ydych chi'n anghyffyrddus efo hynny, fysa chi'n gadael I rhywun wybod os gwelwch yn dda. There are cameras here televising the event, and there are also photographers, and if anybody is uncomfortable with the thought of being photographed or on film, could you please let one of us know. So there's 15 minutes, please, and if you could in that time, take your seats. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
just wait for her to give us
Mae'r gwasanaeth yn mynd I ddechrau'n fuan iawn mewn 30 munud. Sefyll will start in about 5 minutes time. Os gai ofyn I chi wneud yn siŵr fod chi wedi troi eich ffonau symudol I ffwrdd yn gyfan gwbl os gwelwch yn dda. If I could ask you kindly to make sure that you've turned your mobile phones off completely so that that doesn't disturb the proceedings. If there is an emergency, there are 3 fire exits, one to my left here in the front, one at the back, and this here, the entrance that most of you use to come in. Mae 'na allanfeydd ar gyfwng, 2 ar yr ochr chwith I mi fan hyn, ac 1 ar yr ochr dde, y ffordd oedd rhan fwy yna chi mewn. In the case of an emergency, we're not expecting an alarm, so if there is an alarm, if you would respond, and the security people are the ones dressed in blue. Mewn ar gyfwng, bobl I chi ddilyn ydy'r rhai sy'n gwisgo'r cotiau glas. Diolch yn fawr.
It's on, isn't it?
apparently, so
I can hear them. Yes. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Market Hall in Abergavenny, and we are here, as you know, to celebrate and remember the life of a dear friend and colleague, Eddie Butler. How do you describe him? A modern Renaissance man who was a sporting icon, a poet, a novelist, a linguist, a thinker, and a creator. His interests were as wide as he was wise. If you want to use a really clever word, a word that Ed would have understood, you'd call him a polymath. I was lucky enough to know him as a professional colleague and as a friend. In fact, 2 years ago, we walked through this very hall. He said, you must come, you must come. It's the Abergavenny Food Festival. I recommend it to all of you. It's terrific. But you walk anywhere here with Ed, and it was like being with a film star or a member of the royal family. Everybody wanted to stop him, shake his hand, you know, clap him on the back, have a quiet word. And he obliged them all, albeit slightly embarrassed that everyone knew who he was. My job is to guide you through today's service, and it is a celebration. And I have Ed's voice in my head saying, make it good, Clarabelle, and know when to shut up.
If you're lucky or gifted, you can leave a mark on the world. Leave something good to be remembered by. Eddie Butler was a man of many gifts.
Every sport is looking for something special, something that makes it stand out from the rest.
There was an obvious talent for playing sport, for club and country. Talent enough to lead that nation with rugby in its soul.
And Butler has scored a superb try.
There was, though, a contrast. That dray-horse frame of a back row forward containing the mind of a poet. An ability to play the game more than matched by a talent to describe it. And then to learning himself, given the chance to work with the voice of rugby, Bill McLaren.
Are you out of breath, Bill?
I'm thoroughly impressed, but I'm thoroughly impressed with the game, Eddie.
So how do you follow a master? Eddie did so with his own voice, by giving voice to all those who watch, by finding the words to explain, to articulate the myriad emotions that sport can bring.
Oh, England, what have you done? And Wales, what are you doing?
And there was a mind that often simply saw the humour in it all.
Made a possibly unwise disclosure that he shaves his legs.
Brought the light to go with the shade.
Shave away, Gavin, shave away! Wales are in the lead!
But greater still was his ability to show us what television sports broadcasting could be. Not mere shouting or excitable noise, but lyrics to work with the music of the game. Or prose to give us pause for thought.
Slowly, China opened her door to the world and offered a cautious hand of welcome.
Pictures, music and words combined, television sport as art.
Inspire a generation. The billboard slogan that became the Olympic wish.
He was above all a writer, quite often unheralded, scripting for others to read. Better still, if we were lucky, brought to life by his voice and his delivery.
The sport of a silence beautifully broken.
Eddie always fell upon the fitting way to describe the grand occasion, whatever the occasion.
And after 36 straight defeats, Italy have won in Cardiff.
He was, most recently, working on memorials for the Queen, before the trip to South America as ambassador for a cancer charity. Which tells you about an even greater talent that leaves a deeper mark. To give and to be generous, to be warmly recalled on and off the pitch.
My claps aren't good enough for you, are they, Phil?
Always good enough.
A man of so many gifts, a life so full, it's difficult to sum up. Eddie would have found the words.
Andrew Cotter there with a beautiful summation of a man who seldom talked about himself. He far preferred to turn the light on others, endlessly interested in them and everything they were doing. I said earlier, and Andrew said it there, he was a poet. And it was his use of language and his care with words that really marked him apart. And I felt that his greatest television achievements were those end of games roundups at the end of an Olympics or a Paralympics. The highlights, they'd often run to 10 or 12 minutes long, and it was his script that drove them, his brain digesting, cogitating, ruminating, and then capturing not just the gold medal winning moments and the stars of the games, but the very soul of the event. They were literary masterpieces. And he did the same on over 40 documentaries, many of them you wouldn't even know that he'd written, and often for the voices of others. People like Bill Nighy, Benedict Cumberbatch, James Corden, Julie Walters, or Christopher Eccleston. He'd always ask, who's it for? And that was so that he could create the rhythm and the pace for their voice. And he was so generous. He wanted it to sound like them, and he wanted them to sound good. He made people around him better. He made them raise their game. He didn't seek or need credit, and he loved the production and the creation of art, and that's what TV was in his hands. Bear in mind the huge breadth of his curiosity and the way he could turn his hand to archery or sailing at the Olympics. And believe me, these were sports he knew nothing about, so he learned about them, and what's more, made them sound interesting. I watched him work on location and at home, and he would never disappear into a quiet room or take himself off into a separate office. He loved having the hubbub of everyone around him, so all of us laughing and chatting, or in the kitchen with the kids and Sue doing their thing around him. He could be in the room, but away in his head at the same time. He was a man who loved to take the scenic route, not for him the motorways and the dual carriageways of life. If there was a view or a monument to admire, an industrial site to see, even if it took an hour or two longer, he would be on that road, stopping off at a cathedral or a country church. At the Beijing Paralympics, we worked together, and not unnaturally, Ed suggested that we should go and see the Great Wall of China, so off we went. But we also went, and that was amazing, and seeing it, and he, of course, had done a lot of work that I hadn't done, so he could tell me all about it, brilliant, and exactly how long it was, and etc. And then we went to a restaurant in Beijing, and they served, with the food, a bowl with water and a goldfish in it. And we didn't know whether we were meant to drink the water, eat the goldfish, or just admire it, so we chose the latter option. He was a good man to have on your side. We'll make it work, he'd say. So let's hear Ed talking about the things that mattered most to him.
I come from half an hour away off the mountain, from Monmouthshire. Not a centre of revolution. Not really Welsh at all. So it is said. Well, I have been lucky in my life to have been to just about every corner of this land of ours, and it is my simple conclusion that there is far more that binds us together than keeps us apart. We are recognisable wherever we go as being from Wales, even me.
The big day in Merthyr, it was the most uplifting day of my life. I am Edward. I should have been Edwin. My grandfather's name was Edwin. He was a steel worker in Scunthorpe, and his first son was an Edwin who became a professional footballer with Grimsby Town. I was going to be Edwin, but my mother sort of cooled on the name Edwin and decided I would be Edward. I am the son of English parents. My father worked as a scientist who came to Wales after the Second World War to work in the new factory in Pontypool. British nylon spinners. The nylon, as it was called, a fresh start on many fronts. I can't say I look back that fondly on my school day. It was quite a harsh environment in the mid-70s. It was a sort of post-war generation of teachers, and it was quite ferocious. Nowadays, that's much better. We managed to find the balance between the sport and the social side of things and the academic side of things. I suppose they instilled in me a certain disrespect for the establishment, which I don't think is unhealthy. So yeah, I thank Monmouth for giving me a slight spirit of rebellion, really. Sport dominated my life at school and actually did at Cambridge, but I managed to mix things up better at Cambridge. I've had quite a few children through all systems, really. I have so many children. I've dabbled with just about every type of education there is. And yeah, no, I'm pleased. I'm very proud father, you know, seeing what they are now, that I think they've survived it much better than I did.
Squire serves it to Cobner. Cobner wants to try. And there it is, and it turns out to be Eddie Butler. A sixth try of the season for Butler.
Rugby has this hold on us. I remember the wonderful Ray Prosser said to me, Edward, he said, rugby in Pontypool is much more than a game. We never used Welshness as a weapon in our armoury. We were pretty violent in our own right, but that we didn't actually take much stirring. We relied more on our own identity, the little Pontypool, you know, up and at 'em. I look back on my rugby career with a fair amount of anguish, actually, because it was so tough. Our winning was great, but it was mixed with a fair degree of tension.
In comes Hadley. At pace, Butler. Butler going for the post. Back to Hadley. What a try, and under the post for Wales.
It's very difficult to replace playing because nothing really comes close. But it doesn't last that long, so you know the rest of your life is just trying to replicate it, I suppose. When you go live on the day of an England-Wales game, there's no better feeling than Hugh Bryan and Eddie. You know, it gets you.
There is no place like it on big rugby match day.
And we're all in search, perhaps, of that something to replace those playing days. You know, when you run out onto the Arms Park, you have to cut through the wall of sound. Nothing really comes close to that. But live broadcasting in the Six Nations is as close as you'll get.
Alex Cuthbert against Mike Brown. Cuthbert, hands off Brown. Cuthbert for the line.
The showdown in Cardiff when Wales beat England by 27 points to win the title, that was probably as good a moment in commentary as I've had. Yes, especially with Brian Moore alongside me, gnashing his teeth.
Still going to Cuthbert. It's turning into a rat.
What I'm most proud of in my life? Yeah, when my first novel was published, I think that was a big moment for me. It's the last month of putting the final touches to The Head of Gonzo Davis. I felt on a sort of a moment of levitation, which sounds ridiculous, but it was just great fun to do it.
In the meantime, said Gonzo, there's a celebration to finish. And Twin Tub sat back down on his stool and struck up a ballad, mournful yet rousing. The sound poured unobstructed out of the clubhouse at the end of West Street, where the lights didn't shine, and flowed down and over the village and out across the moorland and up to the very tops of the mountains.
Gonzo Davis, the main character of two of those novels, is a gnarly back row forward, and Ed insisted it was not autobiographical. He wrote 3 novels and 2 non-fiction books, plus thousands, literally thousands of articles. In real life, our hero loved learning. His linguistic skills, honed by living in Franco's Spain in the mid-70s to brush up on his conversational Spanish. He did that and played rugby for the Industrial Engineers of Madrid. He might have followed his father, as you heard there, into football. Ken Butler captained Wycombe Wanderers and won an amateur cap for England. But rugby stole his heart. Reflecting on his playing career, here is a colleague of his at BBC Events and a great admirer of our Ed, Hugh Edwards.
Nothing really comes close to that sense of being in the changing room, running out and just being there on your little stage.
Edward Thomas Butler was destined to appear on both national and international stages. His dress rehearsal for those grander arenas, his first rugby steps, were on the fields of Monmouth School, earning rave reviews as a lanky back row forward.
We played a certain brand of rugby which was just great, you know, it was a bit of this and a bit of that and a lot of everything. We were so tight as a team. Rod Seeley ran the first 15 for many years. We all need one teacher who sort of just lifts our soul a bit.
Ed, and his hair, moved from the Shires to the Spires of Cambridge in 1976, where he studied French and Spanish at Fitzwilliam College. Amid the academia, there was another language, that of rugby. He represented the Light Blues in each of his 3 years there, twice beating Oxford at Twickenham, all of it covered live on the BBC.
Now Thornton trying to take his chance. He retrieved and set up the scrummage. Inside to Butler. 2 or 3 metres out. Oxford in some disarray. Cambridge driving over. Robbie has it. Has a go on the narrow side. Thornton. And it's out to Ian Gregg. It seemed inevitable.
A fine piece of sustained play. The ball being brought back inside to the man. A superb ball.
At Pontypool Park, the young Cambridge student, nicknamed Bamba, found his rugby home and forged lifelong friendships with coach Ray Prosser and his hard men.
What always struck me about Pontypool Park, it is fantastically beautiful. I mean, it is the most picturesque setting.
Good afternoon and welcome to Pontypool Park, a fine setting in which to play rugby football.
I just loved the contrast that the rugby here was anything but picturesque.
Pretty? No. Effective? Yes. Pooler smashed everything in their path.
A hat-trick. The pick-up is by Butler, captain of Pontypool. He's got help from Squire. They're over the line. Can they get to ground? Perkins to the front. Butler is around to knit them all together, to suck in Pontypridd's back row.
Mr. Bindle on the far side to Hanson. Hanson will make the corner. Hanson has scored.
Tremendous rolling ball, smashing it.
And here's your starter for 10. Eddie captained Pooler 145 times. How many times did they win? The answer is 126.
He scored! Will the forwards go for a pushover? Yes, the try has been awarded. Given to Butler.
Been here 6 seasons and I think it took me 5 before I was accepted and then they made me captain. So it certainly takes a bit of time, but they're a great bunch of lads and Once accepted, just remember the big happy family we've got here.
At just 23, Eddie made his debut for Wales at the Old Arms Park against France in 1980.
On the field for the new cut, Butler and Les Keane. Let's wish them a good game.
Keane throws up, went Noster again. Williams, Davies on the loop. That goes to Donovan. That was another brilliant tackle by Rutherford. Inside there to Eddie Butler, and Butler has scored a superb try.
And the captain's armband would follow.
Well, tomorrow a new-look Welsh team, under a new captain, Eddie Butler, sets out on another campaign.
As a player, Ed would tell you that he shifted pianos rather than played them. But he was a leader for both club and country, never taking a backward step. He was a man of his beloved Pontypool, of Wales, of the Barbarians, and of the Lions.
Now the pressure's on the French. Casey goes. He puts Titley away. Titley heads for the flag. Butler scores! The glee on the face of the Welsh as Eddie Butler scores a vital try.
Edward Thomas Butler. He loved his family, he loved the written word, he loved the spoken word, and he loved the game.
And I'm delighted to welcome here on stage three men who played with Ed, who knew him well. Bob Norster, Alistair Hignell, David Bishop, thank you. Higgy, first of all, you were his captain at Cambridge, so spill the beans.
Well, not just his captain, he came to our college as well, so I think I can safely say I was the first man to buy Eddie a pint in Cambridge, and about 500 others as well.
Did he buy pints back?
Oh, yes, yeah, he was a very generous man, but I remember the first night he arrived in the bar, and our college rugby team were training very hard on interval training, the interval between pints. And Eddie came in and they saw this tall, gangly man coming in, and they thought, hey, we're going to win Cuppers competition now. But I already knew about Eddie, so I said, we'll buy you a pint. And he was really worried that he didn't want to have a pint. And you thought, he's not a proper man of Wales, he's not a Welsh rugby player, is he? And he said, I've got a Spanish exam tomorrow, and I daren't fail it. And I said, look, you're here, you're in Cambridge, you're not going to fail tomorrow, so come out with the boys. And it didn't take long. He came out with us, and I remember seeing his first game for Cambridge University as well. Again, what impressed us most was, I was watching and helping select, was that, and there's some of them are here, that normally forwards, particularly public school forwards, have an attitude to rucking of a sort of after you, Squire. Whereas Eddie just trampled straight over the nearest player, and we said, he will do for us.
Bob, you knew him for years. Where did it all start, your friendship?
A long way back, actually. We first come in opposition at playing cricket, of all things. I'm from a little Valleys town, not a stone's throw, quite a large stone's throw away, actually, in Blaina, a little mining village, and Eddie played for the relatively aristocratic town of Ragland, and we played on Blaina Park. I can remember this day that I thought I was quite a decent fast bowler, and Eddie was a decent batsman, that's for sure, and he hit me all over the ground of Blaina, actually, which really upset me, and the ultimate humiliation was a straight six back over my head, which really hurt. But it's surprising after that, and then the many battles we had, because of course I was playing for Cardiff all that time, he was playing for Pontypool, arch rivals, and there were many bloody encounters along the way. I've still actually got a scar from Eddie, believe it or not, and a genuine, playing sevens. We played Pontypool in the Snelling Sevens, which Cardiff won, by the way. But Eddie took a bit of flesh from my thigh, and I've still got the scar across it, and we did exchange lots of blows, and it's perhaps surprising that we became such firm friends, but not really. When we got to know each other, he was hugely impressed that I'd actually been to art college, believe it or not, which is a bit weird, and called me Roberto all my life, which no one else did. And we became firm pals and great teammates playing for Wales, and I used to love listening to him as the voice, effectively, as we all know now, but at the time, not many Welsh captains. I went out to captain, as did Jiffy here, who has certainly not got the voice, neither have I. But to listen to a team talk from Ed was good. It wasn't always as poetic. He's very earthy in lots of ways, but that was his strength. He'd come through a tough school in Pula with Dyer there, and he knew how to motivate people and say the right things to the right people, really.
Well, let's hear a bit more about the days at Pontypool from the Bish. How did he make you feel at home when you started there?
It's difficult, really, to say. I played against Pontypool on a Saturday for Abervale. And on the Monday, I told Charlie Faulkner that I'd be going to Newport to join them from Abervale. So it's a bit of a long story, but I'll make it as quick as I can. So I have to say my goodbyes to Abervale, which you could do in those days. As I walked down the stairs, I see my dad there with Edward, Perkins, Graham Price, Bobby Windsor, Jeff Squire, just goes on and on. And he said, I heard you go into those black and amber bleep bleeps. So I said, okay.
I'm very impressed there that you did your own
Well,
bleeps.
I've been practicing.
I've been warned.
I've been practicing all morning, Claire.
Well done.
So, and there probably will be a few more bleep bleeps, so you're going to work out yourself, David. So anyway, cut a long story short, Pross offered me, in a nutshell, to play against Australia in 2 or 3 weeks' time, and this is 1981. And just that was it, really. I'll see you on Monday training, and off you go. So there's a true Pontypool great here today, Terry Cobner, who was captain of the club at the time. I didn't know at the time he was the Hayatollah Khomeini. You couldn't, you had to book an appointment to speak to him, apparently. But anyway, we go training, we do our training. For the first time in my career, he sends me over with the forwards, Prosser. No, well, if you're a scrum half, you usually with the backs, working with the backs. So he sends me over with the forwards. So it's my first day in school, you can imagine, my first new school, first day. So they all crowd him, and Cobner's giving him a bit of a bleep bleep, and I'm standing on the outer circle. So, not knowing, obviously you know their names, Butler, Squire, they all play all Welsh internationals, and Bobby Windsor, all these people. So you're sort of standing in a round circle out the back, and Cobb sort of stood up and see me at the back there. Open up, he said. So they open up, and here's me, expecting welcome to Pontypool, etc., etc. And he said, so you're the new bleep, bleep, bleep Messiah. And I turned around, and I've looked, and my whole body said, don't bite, don't. And I went, well, give me the ball and watch your bleep, bleep ball there. And I knew right there and then, I knew I was in serious trouble. Serious trouble. You look at Cobner, I mean, you had to book an appointment to look at him, apparently. So as I've looked at him, and Eddie came across me, and he's, well, at Pontypool he's known as Bamba, but for me, he was always snooty. Sorry. So anyway, Snooty comes over after all the rivalry, and I thought, I'm going to get killed, he's going to kill me. And he came across and he said, well, have that, you bald-headed bleep, bleep, bleep. I just broke the ice so much. I know everyone here got a thing with Eddie Butler. I'd like to think I had a special thing with him.
You did. You did.
Thank him for his family, let me know his family and everything else, but yeah, I miss him. Great man. That's it.
Thank you. And Higgy, you knew him, obviously commentating alongside him at various matches, but also you knew him as a producer.
Yes, back in, I think it was 1987, you may have been involved. Yeah. There was an England-Wales game in Cardiff where the English somehow got accused of all sorts of dirty play. And there was fist fights, and the England captain got suspended, and Cucci got in trouble, and all this sort of thing. And Ed was a producer for the Sunday programme, and obviously all the English experts had seen the writing on the wall and decided they weren't available. But he phoned his old college mate up and said, Higgy, what are you doing tomorrow, Sunday? We want you in the studio to discuss the English violence. So I said, well, for you, Eddie, I'll come. And I came along and I tried to. We went through the videotape before the game saying, there's a bit where a Welshman was violent. Look, there's Jonathan Davis, he hit somebody. I was trying to get all these clips into the thing, and Eddie was saying, I don't think it's going to work with our audience. So we carried on, and we did the programme. And that was a time when I worked for him. He was the producer, and it was actually the first time I met Sue.
And Bob, you, I know, spent an awful lot of time with Ed up mountains as well as down here on land, as it were.
Yeah, we had some great times. I mean, like Ed himself said in the VT earlier, it's hard to replicate what you have from a team sport like rugby, and one of the things you look for in your later years, I guess, is to feel some of that camaraderie and togetherness, which we certainly did. We did the captain's climb to Kilimanjaro together with a good group of former captains, raised some great money for Velindre. Jonathan's the head of, and thankfully over the years our good pal Andy Thomas of Prostate Cymru there didn't take much persuading, but he asked both Eddie and myself to become ambassadors, and we are very proud ambassadors for the last number of years. Spent some great times preparing for all of this up in the Beacons and so on, and had some great times on the mountains of Ecuador, of all places, together. And I really should have been on the last trip, but wasn't. But in many ways, glad I wasn't really. But, you know, yeah, it was a wonderful time together. We had some real special moments. And Ted is the guy that I always turn to run something past, you know. So it was a case of he'd be my phone book and he'd stay in there, really.
Thank you all so much. Really not easy for any of you to talk about him because you loved him so much. So thank you. The Bish and Higgy and Bob, thank you. Thank you. It is time to raise our souls and raise our voices as well, because we're going to go to the very heart of Gonzo Davis land with the Beaufort Male Choir, and they are going to lead us all with Cumronda, Bread of Heaven. The words will be on the screen, so over to you. Thank you. That's just what we needed. Now, we all have a person in our lives, and particularly in our early life, who makes all the difference, whose belief in us makes us believe in ourselves. And for Ed, that man was Ray Prosser, his coach at Pontypool. We'd like to play you a piece that Ed wrote when Pross died in 2020. This is how he summed up a man who had had a profound effect on his life.
Pross, our giant. Girders for shoulders, hands made to shift slag at his Pantec steelworks with no need for a bulldozer. And language. If heavy industry once turned Pontypool's night sky orange, Pross could turn the air blue. His language was a tourist attraction. But he was a thoughtful coach, plotting Pontypool's rise with Terry Cobner. Endless discussions on scrummaging with the front row, our Bob perhaps his favourite, or maybe the Bish. And the rest of us, we served Pross's machine. But he was a kind man too, his smile a mile wide, shovel hands delicate in his garden, stretching his great frame over the tin roof of his shed at the steelworks, staring upwards, knowing everything about the aeroplanes in which he feared to travel. A complex man hiding himself in his self-declared simplicity. The truth is simple. Pross was a giant like no other.
And that's such a great example of how Ed could encapsulate the character, the very essence of a multifaceted man in a little over a minute. It shines with love and respect. And I'm going to hand over now to Gough Davies, who played with Ed at Pontypool and therefore under the care of Ray Prosser.
Thank you, Claire. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great privilege to stand up here and pay tribute to a great friend of mine. Our very first training session coincided. Eddie had been invited to train with Pontypool. You had to have an invite in those days, right? And I just come back down from Leeds, and it was the summer of '76. Sounds like a Bryan Adams song, doesn't it? It was a summer of '76, the Scorcher, those of you old enough to remember that. And training was brutal, and I mean absolutely brutal. And I remember at the end of the session, Eddie and I had already sort of bonded because we were looking at each other thinking, what the hell is this all about, you know? And he wandered up to me and said, what was that all about? I said, I've got no idea, my old mate. He said, a little bit different from Cambridge. Just a bit. And that was the start of life under Pross. And I'm going to, if you forgive me, expand a little bit later about Ed's relationship with Ray. Sue kindly shared with me a letter that she'd found in Ed's correspondence. And I need just to put it in context. The letter was from Ray, and my colleagues, my teammates are not going to believe that Pross wrote a letter, all right? But it's a letter to a young Eddie Butler who was only 19 at the time, and it really displays, I think, a number of things. First of all, it displays the regard that Pross already had for Eddie, the potential that he saw in him, and then also it gives you an indication of the mentality of the club at that time. As I said, Pross was an interesting character, and I need Bishop here to do the bleeps, I think, but we'll leave those out of it. Pross wrote to Eddie when Eddie was in Japan on tour. And again, no WhatsApp in those days, no Zoom, you know, no emails, so it had to be a written letter. Let me read it to you, because it really speaks for itself, I think, in some ways. Quote, "Now, Eddie, a few reminders about your play." Pross couldn't resist doing some coaching techniques, even in a letter. Okay? He says, "In the line-out, reach for that ball. Remember, it's just about the most important set-piece ball you can win. Back of the line-out ball. and an ideal place for you to use your height. Then, in the scrums, shove if they're going for the drive, but if they aren't, break, and 9 times out of 10, go to the opposite side that they put the ball in. That's to your left, unless, of course, the scrum is on the left side of the field and the wing forward can cover it. Then look and break open and get across and behind your backs. And in the rucks, if you are not one of the first ones there, hit them with your shoulders and your belly and chest. Always going low and shove over. But enough of that. You don't want to be lectured by an old man. Anyway, the club have been pretty up and down since you left. And last Saturday at Bedford, Ron Floyd was sent off, yet another one, for punching an opponent in the line-out who was jumping across him. The ref gave him his marching orders, and in the Sun on the Monday, the writer Ian Todd gave us a terrible name and said it was a rough game. It wasn't, it was quite tame. I think we are getting the backlash of that John Billows article in the Western Mail. Now all the refs are looking at us. We are still trying to find someone to fill your boots, and we are missing you because with Dickie Barrell leaving the club, we are stuck for a good replacement. But we have our eye open, and we're hoping we will be able to pinch them, but still, we want you back. We'd be glad to have you back. I will keep my eye open to see if I can read anything about you, and I shall be keeping my fingers crossed that you can have a bit of form and luck to get on. So until I either hear or see from you, good luck, Ray, brackets, Pros. P.S. Isn't it great that Dick is captain of Wales? Dick in the P.S. was Terry Cobner's nickname, named after his father. I think that letter, for me, just demonstrates, first of all, the regard that Pros had for Eddie, okay, and the potential he saw in him. And obviously, Cobb was captain of Wales, Jeff Squire was captain of Wales, Eddie was captain of Wales. And I think that says a great deal. For me also then, it also sees the start of what we regarded as a bit of a siege mentality, right? We all thought that everyone hated us, right, okay, which they probably did, right, okay? And as a consequence of that, it made us a tighter unit. And as a player, I think very often Eddie was underrated. He had fantastic hands, right? He was a great cricketer, right? Fantastic hands, silky skills, could draw, knew the exact time to see a pass, like Jeremy down the front here, okay, right? A skilled number 8, when the rest of our packer forwards were rhinos on the charge, right? Unbelievable. And for me as well, as not as just a great player, he was a good man, a real good man. If someone was coming, playing, making their debut, Eddie put his arm around him, would encourage him, and do the very best to make that person feel welcome. Mind you, we had so many players, it was like a revolving door, at some time. For me, one of the outstanding memories of Eddie as a player was the way he used to take the ball from opposition kickoffs. He'd always catch. He never dropped it, okay? And those were the days where you'd be up in the air catching the ball, the tackler could hit you in the air, okay? Wrapped arms, didn't need that, just smash into someone, okay? So when you were jumping and trying to catch the ball, you were really exposing your ribs. Eddie, make no mistake about it, okay, was fearless. Absolutely fearless, okay? And I think very often that bit is forgotten about Eddie. Very quickly then, I'd like to say a little bit about what he was like as a skipper, okay? Quietly spoken, assertive, certainly influential, great sense of humour. This one is for you, Jeff, okay? We played Llanelli on the park, and I remember there was no hollering and whooping and cheering and shouting in our dressing room in a warm-up. We were well drilled. Prost and his backs coach, Ivor Taylor, had us well drilled. We knew exactly what we had to do, all right? 5 minutes before kick-off now, the opposition must have wondered whether we were in the changing room because it was so quiet. Everyone was doing their own thing, reflecting, thinking about our own little jobs. Playing the Scarlets on the park. 5 minutes before we go out, Eddie says, right, listen up, you lot. We got this lot today. Now, let me tell you, right, if we lose today, this is what's going to happen. You're going to come back in this changing room, and the changing room's next door to each other, and you're going to be listening to that bloody lot, right, whooping, hollering, and singing Sosman Vach and Callan Lan. He said, now, I don't mind hearing those in the National Stadium, but not on Pontypool Park. Now, do me a favour, get out there from the start, give them a good thumping, right, and send them home with their tails between their legs. West is best. Ha! Beast is east. Right, okay. And that was it. Off you go, stick together, let's do it. That was Eddie, okay? Great, as we all know, with words, okay? But also was able to motivate people in a quiet, unassuming way, because he always had the right words. I'd just like to finish, really, by saying that I feel greatly honoured to be able to say that throughout his career at Pontypool, okay, I played in the same team. He put me in for so many tries on the blind side, it was brilliant, okay? But he's a really, really good man. Great sense of humour. When I bumped into him, he'd always say, and sincerely, he'd always say, how are you? How's the family? Big hug, okay? A great, great man and a great family man, okay? And I'm very honoured to be here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sir Goff. That was lovely. And we all have a huge amount of admiration for Ed, for everything that he could do. But a lot of us here have also learned from him how to be in TV. And I don't mean on TV, how to be in TV, how to work with people as a team, how to craft and create. He didn't, to be honest, have an awful lot of time for senior management, and I apologise to those present, and thank you for making the effort. But he had all the time in the world for the programme makers, and that means the camera operators, the sound engineers, the VT editors, the directors, the producers. He loved them, and they loved him.
Yeah. I got some good memories. If you knew you were working with Eddie Butler, it was going to be a good day.
You'd always want to sit next to Ed and experience him and his wonderful words.
To the public, he was Eddie Butler, the commentator, the player, the amazing wordsmith. But to us, he was just Ed. He was our colleague and our friend and someone we just looked forward to spending time with.
He always cared about the people that he was working with. He was a genuine man and a gentleman.
The vibe you had with Ed was always cool, classic.
He wasn't describing what was happening. It was as if he was describing how people felt or how do you feel. There was nobody like him.
Eddie had empathy, not just for the people that he was working with, but for the people that he was writing about or who he was meeting. And I think that came across so much in a lot of documentaries I made with him. He brought people to life. He brought their stories to life. You know, people like John McEnroe, Sevi Ballesteros, Sir Andy Murray, Sir Bobby Charlton, Martina Navratilova, Jimmy Hill. He told their stories in a way that captured them, that captured your attention. And I think that was his empathy, and that's what made Eddie so great. I got a lot of claps in the back because of Eddie's words.
Eddie was one of the first presenters of Scrum 5, of course, and I was the first producer of the very first series. We wanted to make a mark with the first opening sequence, so we had this madcap idea, dressing Eddie up as the Grim Reaper, putting on some rocks down in Southern Down, which is a ragged part of the Welsh coast, and he was going to prophesise the death knell of rugby because the game had just gone pro.
I'd like to dedicate this number to all the people I've sived over the years.
We gave him the idea and he just smiled.
I'd like to welcome you to the series, Eddie.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Once more.
I think we got something there.
Is it all right?
Following Tuesday, we came in and we had a 2-page spread of complaints in the Western Mail. And again, Eddie just smiled because it had done its job. Scrum 5 was up and running.
Throughout the years, Ed gathered an awful lot of nicknames. I know him as Ed. He had Eddie, obviously, Eduardo, Bamba, Snooty, Ted, so many names that reflected the variety of his life. But on the reverse side, if you were given a nickname by Ed, my gosh, what a special feeling that was, and you felt as if you were the member of a very, very special club. My nickname was Salisbury, and I hope it will always remain that way.
It was a complete pleasure to see him walking across and come into the room. Marco, how are you? Or to the editors, he always Italianised their names. Riccardo for Richard, Antonio for Tony.
He would take time to see how you were, how your family were, just to chat, and the work came second. It was always that time for you, first of all.
That's what I remember about Ed, is that smile, and what ignited that smile was his family and Sue.
You judge people in front of the camera on how they react to people behind the camera or how they interact with people behind the camera. And Ed was always just exactly the same with everyone, and that's what I loved about him.
I think what was always interesting with Ed was you might cut a piece and you'd feel it was pretty good. It was as if you prepared a really good backing track. But then it would go the dub and you'd come back and you'd hear it with Ed's voice. And it was as if he'd just found that melody which maybe you could almost hear in your head. But he'd just nail it. It would just come back and he'd make it sing. It was just special.
He was a great storyteller, whether it be with pictures on television or in the written press. And Peter Jackson, you were a colleague of his at BBC Wales, but also you were rugby union correspondent at the Daily Mail. How did Ed get into journalism?
Before I answer that, Claire, could I first say what a rare privilege it is to be asked by the Butler family on behalf of rugby writers the world over. We loved him. We loved Eddie Butler, and it's a tribute to him that people like Stephen Jones, Steve Bale, Roberto Kitson. He never called him Rob. We call him Rob. He called him Roberto. Graham Thomas. They're all here today to pay homage. How did he get into journalism? Well, we always suspected he had a hankering for wanting to be, because he was interested in newspapers right from the early days when he was captain of Wales. And he rang me up one day and he said, "I've got a job with the BBC." I said, "Great. You know, in the sports department?" No, he said, "I'm in the press department, the press office, as an assistant." And you think of people who've been miscast in life, you know. And I think if you went back to Rome in about the 15th century and you were a little Michelangelo and you go to a paint company in Rome and you say, "Look, I'd like to join you." And they said, yeah, we got a box of crayons and a colouring book, and if you go down there, see if you can join up the dots and we'll decide whether you're any good or not. So mercifully, Eddie escaped pretty quickly from the press office, got into BBC Wales as a producer, always was wanting to write for newspapers. And he had gifts that many of us don't have. I mean, he had a command of the English language, which was second to none. Eddie was, as you've said, as everybody said, the most generous of people. And yet he regarded words as very, they were like 20-pound notes. You did not use them unless you got full value from them. And I think in a world today when probably a few sports commentators perhaps talk too much, Eddie's a shining example He was of the more is less variety, and he was just multi-dimensional from the word go.
He also managed to combine the two skills, commentating and filing 1,000 words for the Observer, either somehow during the match or certainly as soon as it finished.
Oh, amazing. I mean, I know some people, Steve Jones has been in this all his life, pick up the phone and do 1,000 words. The game has been won or lost in the last few minutes. You've had 2 sendings off. You've had a couple of major injuries. You've got an awful lot to cram into 1,200 words. And Eddie had the ability not only to do that, but to do that almost straight after he'd finished his commentary. So that showed you the skill of the man. And, you know, Claire, we go back to the days when Bill McLaren, the great Bill McLaren, retired, and everybody said, well, it's impossible. Who could possibly follow that? But Eddie did, and he did it his way. And his way then, you know, I can hear his voice in my head saying, come on, Six Nations is about to start, wrap it up, son. That he did it his way, and people are now saying, isn't this going to be a strange Six Nations without Eddie Butler? I mean, I cannot think of a single rugby commentator, rugby journalist, who was held in such high esteem that match of the day gets interrupted halfway through. Shut up, Pep, no more from you, Mr. Klopp. And there's a 3-minute tribute to Eddie Butler. And I think that was a sign of how highly he was regarded. You know, it was, he was just an absolute master of his craft. And the higher he got on TV, he never forgot us. He was always one of the lads on tour. Great fun. Being with Eddie Butler made you feel better. And my God, do we miss him.
Beautifully said. Beautifully summed up. Just one final thought as well about being on tour with him. The places that we get to go, quite often, it can become a bit of a, you know, I'm working there for, go to the ground, you know, go back to the hotel, go to the ground, whatever. He made sure it was always more than that.
Oh, it was always great fun with Eddie. I mean, one example springs to mind during the Lions tour of 2001, which ought in many ways to have been the greatest of Lions tours. It was probably the best squad of players they had. But it was overloaded with intensity. Graham Henry was the coach, Andy Robinson, Phil Lauder, all these people, and the players were just running to the ground. And one night we got a break from all that, and Eddie had organised a night out at Doyle's Fish Bar in Sydney, and we all got the water taxis home. And then at about midnight, Eddie said, oh, I've forgotten the Austin Healey column. And he ghosted Austin Healey. You know, Austin Healey and Eddie, you know, for the Lions, were a pair that really set the agenda. And I said, well, just play it safe, you know, be sort of fairly anodyne about it, because that wasn't Eddie's style. And as a result of that, there were endless disciplinary hearings. And I remember on the following September flying out of Cardiff to the disciplinary hearing in Dublin. And this was a backhanded compliment of the highest caliber. I just happened, as luck would have it, to be sat next to Graham Henry. And he said, hello, mate. He said, we all know who should be on charge today, and it's not Austin Healey. There was no love lost between Eddie, but my goodness, at the Mail, they never stopped saying to me, why can't we have a column like Eddie Butler does for Austin Healey? Failed. Couldn't compete. Brilliant, brilliant man.
Thank you so much. Thank you, and thank you for being with us today. Peter Jackson. With all of that education and with all of that intelligence, you might expect a little pomposity, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Ed was happiest at home chopping logs or feeding apples to Elvis, sadly no longer with us, or up at Keeper's Pond admiring the industrial view in one direction and the farmland in another. It gave him perspective and a sense of place. And he had a really healthy sense of humour. It was all just a game in the end, and he didn't take himself too seriously. As you'll see in this piece with comedian Chris Corcoran, it's supposedly on the art of commentary.
So to the new Millennium Stadium, a new century and a changing of the guard in the commentator's box too, as wordsmith legend Bill McLaren bowed out and former captain of Wales Eddie Butler picked up the reins.
So the scene is set. here at the Millennium Stadium, the old rivalry. It's Wales against England.
Time for a chat in the eerily empty corridors of the stadium with the man who'll be describing this year's Wales-England game. Did he feel the hand of history on his shoulder?
Like the '66 World Cup, or like, you know, like the Barbarians try.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a sense of responsibility. There's a sense of embarrassment. And I've never quite got used to either seeing myself or hearing myself on television.
Yeah.
So there's a cringe factor there. But and I tell you one thing that you learn not to be afraid of.
Yeah.
If in doubt, don't say anything.
Let the game speak for itself.
There's 75,000 people out there.
Yeah.
And if something happens, 75,000 people will say it for you.
Wonderful run by James Hook. There's that hand up. There's the finish by Hook. Brilliant.
So here we go, Eddie. We're in position. Is this our normal spot?
More or less, yeah. Pretty close, halfway line. Best seat in the house and all that.
Best seat in the house, but not very glamorous.
Bit skanky,
A bit
isn't it?
I mean, look. I mean, literally, we haven't even set this. That's filthy
yeah.
old.
That was thrown at me last
cup.
match.
Was it? I can imagine. Yes. No knee room. How did you get in here, though?
He's squirming.
Sorry for Brian Moore. He'd be fine under this, I imagine. Would he?
Yeah, he's fine. He's got bags of room. Yeah.
And all these kind of like broken electrical bits here. Look.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Yeah.
And then here you go. These are the old lip mat. Haven't you got anything newer than this?
I know it's apparently it just provides the best sound because you have to be this close,
right,
for it to work. But it's one of those funny things.
Smells.
When do you know, when you finish a commentary, you look at it and it's covered in, you know, spit and snot.
Oh, welcome to the National Stadium. It stinks here. It stinks of old pasty.
Yeah. So I thought I'd set Eddie a challenge. Could he commentate on some of the great matches of the past, straight off, cold and unseen? Would he even know who the players were?
Put my glasses
Put your glasses on. Okay. Ready? Okay, here we go. We're off.
Oh, good pickup. Malcolm Dacey. Has it gone too far? No, it hasn't. Good challenge by the Welsh backup there. France going backwards. Not altogether successfully. Malcolm Dacey again. Mark Titley. And that is a try for Eddie Butler, the slowest number 8 ever to play for Wales. What was he doing there? See how grey I'm going even then?
Yeah, I know. How old are you?
26.
Good. All right, that's the first one.
There's more.
Yeah, there's more to come. You like this?
Terry Holmes. Jonathan Davis. That has gone miles too far. Chris Martin should clear this up. And Jonathan Davis scores. I knew that was good.
It takes many years to come to that sort of genius moment where you say, Jonathan Davis scores.
I was trying to think of something. That is a stroke of genius by Jonathan Davis.
Well, come on, we'll give you your last one.
Wales are on the wrong end of a right thumping here. This can only get worse for them. I've just got one of those feelings that this is going to go totally pear-shaped now. And Mark Ella, bless him, scores, and Australia march on towards a Grand Slam. Well done, Australia.
Eddie Butler's pass being snapped up by Ella.
Yeah, do you remember that moment?
Do you know, I basically had my head down in the turf thinking, God, this smells. It really is a horrible taff mud smell coming out of the ground, but I think it could have just been me decomposing on the spot. Thank you. That was thank you very much.
And there you have a lesson in never, never take yourself too seriously. Brilliant. So let's hear more now from Eddie's BBC teammates, led by John Inverdale.
Well, I almost feel actually, just looking at our quartet here, that just for Ed, ABBA have reformed for one afternoon. But obviously we've got...
if you change your mind...
Yeah, but I was going to say, Benny, Brian, you were one half of one of the most extraordinary commentary duos of all time, I think. Well, was it love at first sight, or was it a relationship that was a bit of a slow burner?
He was very incongruous, and when people have talked about Eddie's empathy, empathy is not just putting yourself in someone's shoes in the sense of always being friendly, being nice. It's also understanding that people have different rhythms. And the great thing about Eddie was, if you wanted to chat, he could chat forever about anything you wanted to. But if you wanted to be alone, he could do that as well. And a lot of comedy partners and partnerships are not like that. They get very possessive of each other's time. And if we wanted to go out for dinner, it was fine. If we didn't, no one took offence. Sometimes we walked to the ground together and whatever. And because it was so easy, I don't think I understood until he's not here how good it was. I had no idea. And I always regret, Jeffrey, we had our last commentary in the very corner of a huge studio, didn't we, in Manchester. And I was going to say to him, if we don't get to commentate again together, can I just tell you how much I've enjoyed you and respected you? And I didn't, because I thought I'd see him again. And it's made me now understand, if you feel this way with someone, tell them, because you don't know when you'll not be able to do that. And it was the effortlessness that made it so special.
Love you, Maura.
I always think one of the great things about Eddie was, though, he was so generous with his praise for his colleagues as well. And Sonia, he was a big fan of yours because he always felt you would ask the questions that other people wouldn't do in the post-match interviews. But he was one of those guys as well that when you were with him, you just never knew where the conversation was going to go.
Oh my gosh, let me say first of all, he was passionate about many things, particularly a polo neck jumper. He was very partial to one of those, so Gabby and I are both rocking one today in homage to Ed. I think even on a spring day in Rome, if you could guarantee Ed would probably be wearing one, and you'd know everything was all right in the world because Ed was wearing a polo neck jumper. He loved, we were very fortunate. We would go to Rome and to Edinburgh, and we'd have wonderful evenings out, and I always wanted to sit next to Eddie. And I would get quite grumpy if somebody had beaten me to the chair next to Ed. He loved the debate, he loved to converse with people, but let's be honest, he loved an argument, right? Yeah. He was always bang up for one of those, and oh my goodness, some of the subjects we debated, whether it was the monarchy or capital punishment or Welsh independence, and you could know exactly what Eddie was going to say. He was going no to a hereditary monarchy. He would be like, everybody had the right to a second chance, and up the Welsh, because he was a big supporter of Welsh independence. I would just, if you were lucky enough to be getting that, just to be in his aura, to be in his company, without a question, he is one of the greatest men I have ever met, one of the cleverest, the most talented, and I was just so privileged to be a colleague, but more importantly, to be his pal.
He had this mischievous air, though, didn't he, Jeff?
Yeah, I worked with him. I worked with him every Friday and every Sunday with the Scrum 5 gang. And, he was wicked. We got into a few scuffles. I remember him, as Jacko said, he would do the game and then write the column. And then I remember these Newport fans were having a go at him, 6 of them, and they've just me and him stood there. And he put his pen down and said, "Come on, there's 6 of you." And I went, "Calm down, Ed, calm down." I've been with him as well, if you look, things we've done. We were in Brive when the Pontypridd boys decided to demolish the town of Brive. Luckily, we turned left, not turned right, or we'd have been right in the thick of it. Also, remember the Scrum 5 incident with Gareth Thomas? And the famous thing was, Gareth Thomas was going, "Tell me your sources, tell me your sources." Now, Eddie was a brilliant journalist, very investigative journalist. And if Eddie would have told him who the source was on that afternoon, Gareth Thomas would have had a heart attack, let me tell you. Right? So he kept his, he kept it quiet. And then the best one, we were doing Llanelli versus Newport. It was a crap game. I actually gave the referee the man of the match, which caused a bit of a stir. But Eddie was egging me along, going, "Oh yeah, you're going to have it now." And I remember at half-time, It was a close game. And he was always wicked, but he was always aware of his surroundings, right? Because what he was comfortable. He made everyone else comfortable. You know, he was like my safety blanket, to be honest, because, you know, he picked who he worked with as well, and I made him look really good, to be honest, right? So he was there, and I remember this particular game, and half-time came, and I'm from Llanelli, and there's this bloke giving me a bit of jip in the front. I was like, oh, this bloke's doing my head in now. So I leant over to him and said something. I was like this. And Eddie caught it on the camera in the studio and threw to me straight away, right? He said, well, Jonathan, you're making an interesting point there. What can you tell us? And I was like, and I said, it's going to be a close game, Eddie. You're going to be 2 points in it. He went, well done.
Thing is, Gabby, when you worked with Eddie, wherever it was, whenever it was, he just set the bar so high.
Incredibly high, and I had great pleasure of throwing to him many times in commentary in Six Nations matches, but the first time I worked with him closely was the 2008 Olympics in Beijing. And he had been, as we mentioned earlier, doing the archery, and when that came to an end, anybody with a programme wanted Eddie to do a piece for them, and I was hosting the highlights programme, which local time we'd do at 2 in the morning, and he was set the assignment of following Paula Radcliffe on day 9 in the marathon. She'd had that terrible time in 2004. Could she find redemption in 2008? And Eddie would follow her on the course, craft a beautiful piece, and no matter how great your show was, an Eddie piece made it better. So Ali McIntyre was the editor, and he set Eddie this challenge to go out and produce this piece, which he did beautifully and crafted all day. And then we get to the show, we're live on air, and in typical Ali Mac style, it had 89 items in a 59-minute show. And that day we'd won a lot of medals across a lot of different sports, and you knew what was coming. And during the show we were losing time, we didn't have time. And so as Paula Radcliffe had only managed 23rd place, Eddie's piece was cut from the programme while we were on air. And Eddie obviously found out either by watching this or getting a message from Ali, and the marathon was summed up in a minute, kind of very bog standard type piece, and Eddie's crafting was nowhere to be seen on the peak kind of show. So we finished the show, we go back to the hotel at 3 in the morning, and Eddie was normally long gone from the bar at this point, and we walked into the bar, the makeup artist and the floor manager and myself. Ali was back in the studio getting ready for a running order for a show which probably hasn't even aired yet. And we walk in there, and Eddie's kind of nursing his 3rd and 4th glass of red wine, fuming. You could just see the kind of red mist coming out. And the dragon, the man who was obviously so competitive to be a brilliant rugby player, also had a competitive streak when it came to his work, because a great artist wants people to see his work. And so I think I spent the next hour talking him down from getting Ali into a headlock. And at some point, negotiations went on with Ali that this piece would be aired, but in the morning on breakfast television and not late at night as he'd wanted it to be seen. But I love that because, you know, he's brilliant at what he does. He's urbane, he's lyrical, he uses the most incredible language, but he's a competitive bugger, and he wanted everybody to see that work. So, and it kind of gave me reassurance, actually, that was okay to be like that.
Even though he'd done it 1,000 times before,
exactly.
It mattered. Listen, Jacko mentioned earlier on about commentators now. There are so many platforms which there weren't when Eddie started commentating, and there are so many commentators that kind of mulch into others that it's kind of very difficult to tell who actually is at the microphone. Brian, what would you say set Eddie apart from the rest?
Jiffy, do you remember the big hand that stop, which meant be quiet, let's listen to the referee? And when it first started, I thought, wait a minute, I'm as important as you are. And then I understood, you're right, actually, yes, be quiet, and so on. And his timing was great. When you're talking about bars, I remember coming back from the Italy game, San Flaminio, we're coming back, they've been playing France, and we walked into a bar, and it was full of Basque rugby players who were huge. And they turned to me and said, "Oh, muel." And Eddie was got to speak French. He said, "Let's go." I said, "No, I'm not going." And we proceeded to scrummage against them, because they said, "You're too small. You can't possibly do the ball." And I hooked the ball here, hooked the ball there, went out, left with a standing ovation. And as a wordsmith, Eddie said to me, "You little fucker." Can I just... I tell you what is unusual about this afternoon. When you go to memorial services, usually you are relying completely on second-hand testimony of what people have been like, what they've said, what they've done. With Eddie, we've been so lucky to have so many of his own words to describe himself,
Yeah.
describe other people. And it's so much the better for it, isn't it?
Last word, Jiffy, because the clock's going to beat us. But you were in the commentary box alongside Bill.
Yeah.
And as Jacko mentioned earlier, when Bill McLaren was no longer doing it, everyone said, how does anybody pick up that baton and run with it? And Eddie did it so brilliantly, and it was almost as though he didn't feel the weight of that. He was his own man, and he was going to do it his way.
That was it. He was his own man. He was confident, but, not arrogant. He said a few truths to people in the industry which upset people, but it didn't bother him at all. I just sat there giggling next door to him. But yeah, he was brilliant. And I think, sometimes you think that. I said I wasn't going to do this, but here we are. I was on, when I heard the news, I was out in Utah on a bike ride. And I couldn't actually believe it. And I still don't today. And I remember I worked with him in the last international, Italy. And he'd say, oh, look, here you go, see Jiffy boy with his flat cap and his unshaven chin. And, and I think that it hasn't really hit home. But on Saturday, it will, because I'll be back in the stadium. I'll walk in, and he won't be there to welcome me. And, I miss it.
We all do. We all do. And the millions who'll be watching on Saturday will miss him too. Thank you. Thank you, one and all. For those of us who work with him all have memories of Eddie. Eddie for me will always be actually the picture of Eddie in my mind is, and Claire mentioned Elvis earlier on. If you don't know Elvis, Elvis was actually, with respect to, was the love of Eddie's life. A 30-stone saddleback pig. And to see Eddie cuddling this pig was one of the great images that I will always carry with me. But Eddie and I had lunch in the White Swan pub in Twickenham in 2008, I think it was. It was the day before England-Wales. Wales won the next day, by the way. Just toss that in. And we were going to meet for a quick drink, and it ended up being a very long lunch. And one of the conversations we discussed endlessly was whether Italy merited their place and this, that, and the other. And then I always remember Eddie saying, yeah, but at least they bring musically an awful lot to the party. I mean, their anthem is fantastic, which he said is more than the English do. He said, if you're going to start, England bring nothing musically to the Six Nations party. So if we're going to get rid of anybody, get rid of the English. So we're going, yeah, fine. Anyway, so I then said to him, so of all the songs, let's not go down the Delilah route now, but anyway, of all the songs that any of the fans at any of the Six Nations venues sing, what is the song that you like most? And he said this one, which is why we're going to hear it now.
For you strong rebellions gone.
he had taste, didn't he, Ed? And thank you again to the Beaufort Male Voice Choir, the Fields of Athenry. You heard Ed talk earlier about his children, the team, the quite big team of them. Paternal pride ran through his veins, and the love that burned within him could have warmed the whole of Wales. And of course, they are here, and our love as well, with Bex and Hannah and Jack and Jacob, Nell and Seth, and the latest addition, actually, Arlo Edward, who's only 7 weeks old and is here at the back. Yes, he is. And Nell, I'm going to hand over to you now, so the stage is yours.
When it came to poetry, we all turned to Dad. One night in lockdown, we sat in the back room and recorded Dad read some of his and Mum's favourite poems. This one is special to us. It's about a man about to go to war, wondering if he will return home. None of us could do it justice. So here is the one who can. This is Canoe, written by Keith Douglas, read by Dad.
Canoe by Keith Douglas. Well, I am thinking this may be my last summer, but cannot lose even a part of pleasure in the old-fashioned art of idleness. I cannot stand aghast at whatever doom hovers in the background, while grass and buildings and the somnolent river, who know they are allowed to last forever, exchange between them the whole subdued sound of this hot time. What sudden fearful fate can deter my shade wandering next year from a return? Whistle, and I will hear, and come again another evening, when this boat travels with you alone toward Iffley. As you lie looking up for thunder again, this cool touch does not betoken rain. It is my spirit that kisses your mouth lightly.
Now, for the last 27 years, Sue, no, keep coming, has been by Ed's side. What a team, building a life of love and laughter. And I know Sue has a lot of thank yous. On you go.
As Ed would say, just got to put my glasses on. Thank you. Thank you for coming to Abergavenny today. Ed, he loved this market. It was part of our Saturday mornings. We'd go up the Blorange, and then we'd come back down into town, into this market, and pick up our breakfast. And to see this place full of his friends would have made him really happy. It was a must for Ed at the end of every production he was involved in to say thank you to the crew. And none of this could have taken place without the incredible support we've had from our friends, our community, and our rugby family. You've been amazing. So to Claire and everyone who has shared their memories with us today on stage, to Abergavenny Rugby Club, to Bev, to Mario and Colin, to Graham Davis and BBC Wales, to Phil Chappell, Lowry Charles, Sarah Dickens, to Simon Dorman and Monmouth School, to Rachel Evans, Tracy Evans, Cheryl Haskell, Carl Hicks, Richard Hughes and BBC Sport, Adrian Jones and Orchard Events, to Amelia Jones, Tony Maybe, Paul Matthews and Monmouthshire County Council, to Nick Miller, Stephen McBride, to Joe McCusker, to Richard Owen, Geraint Parry Hughes, Steve Phillips, Nigel Walker and the WRU, to Dave Purchase, Matthew Rees, to Sally Richardson, to Peggy Roma, Peter Small, Hugh Towell, Laura Tennyson, Caris Owens and Whisper, Geraint Rowlands, Media Atom, Nia Thomas and Boom, Cerith Williams and Sunset and Vine, Gareth Williams a Chryw Rondo. Diolch. Thank you from us, and thank you from Ed. And I think it's now the choir.
The sun set in the west over South Wales, and mine and steelworks and factory spilled out their people to the evening and leisure, as the people of the valleys, colliers and choristers, lovers and lonely alike, sang out aloud with life.
Thank you so much. And just one final thought. Much as we will miss him, hard as we will continue to hurt and cry and wail at the injustice of it all, let's remember the man we loved, continue to talk about him, laugh at stories about him, and like him, savour the savagery and the subtlety of sport. The richness of history, the beauty of language, the importance of culture and politics and creativity. Let's live life as he did, with endless energy, kindness, and curiosity. And before you head home, if you have time, people will be gathering at the King's Arms, the Angel Hotel, and the Abergavenny Rugby Club, so that we can carry on sharing memories, as we always will, of a remarkable man. Thank you so much for being here, and may the spirit of Eddie Butler be always with you.